Chapter 8. Brian is read the riot act. Alice looped her hand through Brian's arm and dragged him down the hall to one of the castle's innumerable small rooms of no clear purpose. It did have a few chairs, a scattering of ornamental bric-a-brac, and a bright window, complete with billowing curtains. Alice dropped her brother's arm and took a few brisk steps to stand by that window, hoping the view would be calming, but the rolling hills and icy ocean breeze did nothing to soothe her frustration. She shuddered, pulled the window close with more force than necessary, and wheeled around in a fury. "What the hell, Brian? Is it a full moon? Are you aware, asshole, now? You were barely in the room for 10 minutes, and somehow you managed to insult everyone there. Honestly, you came off like a crazy person. The only reason those ladies aren't calling their mothers to come save them from the mad Lord Latimer is because cell phones haven't been invented yet." "I know," her brother said sheepishly, "but newsflash, Brian, we've got a deadline here. You've got to propose marriage to at least one of these women over the weekend, and they have to say yes, Brian, yes. That the castle floors were already old was the reason they creaked alarmingly beneath her feet, Alice thought, not because she was stamping in fury. She was too mature for tantrums, or you'll die, Alice concluded with ruthless precision. Brian, uncomfortable, managed to chuckle. Harsh. Alice shot him a very unsisterly look, one that made it clear she wasn't up to an exchange of jokey jokes at the moment. He and she had always been close, though they quarreled as brothers and sisters occasionally did. Their fights usually didn't last for long. Brian sensed that this one might be an exception. "I know, all right," he said. He sounded defensive, and hearing that tone in his voice put him even more on edge. "I know. I am perfectly aware how serious things are around here." "Well, then start acting like it," Alice shot back. "It's not like I can go down into the basement and whip up a spare batch of insulin," he said. "I'm banking my calories and counting my units. What else do you want me to do? How about you just act like a normal person?" She threw her hands in the air and started pacing again. "I mean, all you had to do was sit there in your nice new clothes and talk about the freaking weather. But no, you had to get creative." She glared at him over the air quotes. "I get all this." She made a vague gesture that encompassed the castle, the threat of a marriage proposal, and the entire 19th century. "It's upsetting and crazy and weird. But if the choice is to get with the program or die, can you at least not make our job any more complicated than it is already?" Taken aback, Brian tried to defend himself. "But they were so condescending," he said. "I mean, that little girl was awesome, and yes, I know not everyone in 1810 can be super enlightened and modern thinking. I just, well," he rubbed the bridge of his nose a little sheepishly. "I might have overreacted a little," he admitted. "A little? You put on a 3-act, one-person version of You Must Pay the Rent, starring you and terrorizing them. If we were just a little further back in time, I wouldn't be surprised if someone accused you of being possessed by a demon." He gave a little chuckle. "Heh, right," he said. "Demon theater. I like it." But Alice was in no mood for his jokes. "Damn it, Brian. You don't always have to be on, you know. If we want any one of these ladies to like you enough to help us out by agreeing to marry you, you might consider giving up the comedy stylings and just being yourself. Alice, he began. No, she said. Just no. Alice was too tired to maintain her anger and could feel herself running down. I don't mean the thing where you're so afraid of rejection you deliberately try to throw the worst bits of yourself into the room to shock people. That one doesn't work. Remember the Brian who let me lean on his shoulder during my divorce? The one who made me dinner and helped me wade through those stupid legal documents and helped me unpack my boxes 3 times until I finally landed somewhere safe? The guy who listened? That's the guy I need while I'm using my communications degree to try and reverse engineer time travel. What do you want me to do, Alice? Brian asked in a subdued voice. Alice laughed quietly. Nothing too difficult, she said. Just unlock the magic time-traveling spell outlined in your cryptic letter. You know, the thing where you propose marriage to a total stranger before your insulin runs out in the next 3 days? Is that too much to ask? Hearing the words come out of her mouth and seeing her expression, it broke the tension. Alice and Brian both chuckled at the ridiculousness of their predicament. I get it, she sighed. It's a lot. Alice put up a hand to rub the back of her neck. She was getting a headache from lack of sleep and an overabundance of stress. She lifted her gaze and caught Brian watching her. The concern in his eyes smothered the edges from her irritation. The snobbery was a tad overwhelming, she conceded, although I can't swear to it. My guess is it mostly came from a place of trying to impress the castle guy. Who is that? Asked Brian. You, Brian, Alice sighed. She indicated the clothes he was wearing and the room around them. You're the castle guy. They think all of this is yours, the fancy lands and property belonging to Mad Lord Latimer. Brian looked around with dawning comprehension. This isn't play acting to these people. It's their reality, Alice continued. They have come out here to meet the rich noblemen on the hill. Why? Alice gave a half shrug. They want something, she said. Money or connections. Something a fancied lord or lady could offer them. But instead, they meet you, winging it. Oh, said Brian, as he considered his actions from his guest's perspective. He had the grace to look chagrined. I only wish we had a clearer handle on the rules. Point made, Alice was happy to lead the conversation back to the larger dilemma. If this is actual time travel, and it certainly seems to be, Brian interjected, and not a hallucination brought on by Cousin Jessica's third-rate champagne cocktails, then what's the reason behind it? You think there's a reason, he asked, for this? Brian waved his arms in a vague gesture meant to include the clothes, the fossil-filled cliffs, and the whole proposal in a weekend scenario. I've seen a time travel movie or two, said Alice. And are we making choices that are somehow going to sweepingly affect the future? The present? Brian asked. Wherever we're from, she said impatiently. I don't see how, said Brian. If I'm going to marry some random woman and then zip to the present, how's that going to affect anything? I think we need more details, said Alice. About the terms. I mean, do you just have to get the girl to say yes, then poof, bang, zip, we're home? Or do you have to consummate the marriage, which seems like a lot to ask in a weekend. Is there a ceremony with candles and chanting? In fairy tales, all the magic happens with a first kiss. What are the rules here? We could ask the valet guy, said Brian. Mr. Shield? Asked Alice. Gus, agreed Brian with his sublime indifference to names. I don't think he's one of the people pulling the strings in this operation, but also I don't think he's from this time. He's been miraculously unfazed about the whole thing. You're right, said Alice, narrowing her eyes as she sifted through memories of the last few hours. I think there are other people here from other times. Miss Pocket seems like she's one of us and in on the whole thing. She gave me the study materials, and I think the housekeeper's another one, Mrs. Downs. She seems to know everything, all the details about what's supposed to happen. I wonder, she hesitated. What? Asked Brian. How many time travelers are we talking about? How many times has somebody traveled to this castle and gotten stuck here? What's going to happen if we can't get back? I'll be dead, said Brian with dark humor, but I bet you'd make an excellent scullery wench. I think the first thing for you to do is a little damage control with the ladies, said Alice. Maybe pass off your morning rant as nervousness. Or a joke, suggested Brian. A bad joke you took too far, agreed Alice. You'll have to apologize. Try being honest and listening to people when they talk to you. And for God's sakes, no acting. It will be good for you, she added virtuously. While you're doing that, maybe I'll find something out from the valet. How? Asked Brian. I'm not sure, Alice said slowly, but I think he might actually want to tell me. She paused for dramatic effect, a pause somewhat lessened by the gentle billowing of the curtains. A part of her had hoped for a peal of ominous thunder. She slowly lowered the hand she had raised, hoping that Brian had not seen the gesture, or that, if he had seen it, he had just assumed that she was reaching out to close the window that had somehow swung open again. This done, she gave her brother a weary smile. I mean, you're giving up bread for a chance to get home. Maybe the other time travelers will be willing to give up a couple of answers. End of Chapter 8 of Lord Latimer's Ladies by Margaret Elin Schmidt and Dan McLaughlin, and read by Dan McLaughlin.